This noob just reached mythical glory in 154 games with a 70% win rate. And yes, he did it in solo queue, where he had to play different roles, use different heroes, and play with bad teammates. In fact, in his last game before 50 stars, his team was behind 2,000 gold, and one of his teammates went AFK in the middle of the game. Hi, I'm lost and I'm really bad at playing ML. It's to the point that I'm always being called stupid, noob, feeder, and many more bad things by my teammates. But I managed to reach my goal of becoming mythical glory by simply keeping in mind 33 key things in every game I play. I know that sounds a lot, but I'm here to break it all down for you. Number 1 is to pick an easy hero. If you don't have good mechanics or the time to practice high mechanical heroes, then it's better to use easy heroes. If you want my recommendations, comment down below and I'll make a video on it. But in the meantime, you can check how difficult the hero is through Mobile Legends built-in rating. Instead of worrying about doing your combos perfectly, you can focus on other areas of the game such as macro and strategy. That's why I picked Terizla, who has a straightforward skill set but has a huge impact on teamfights. But if you really have a main hero that you love using, even though it's difficult to use, I wouldn't hold you back. What's important is having mastery over the hero that you don't have to think hard about micro mechanics, and based from my experience, that's usually easier to achieve on less mechanical heroes. Number 2 is avoiding distractions. If you're replying to messages, watching TV, or doing something else while in the middle of the game, then it can be truly hard to focus. You would be prone to making dumb mistakes that you wouldn't usually make if you just concentrated on the game more. What I suggest is turning on Do Not Disturb before the match. But remember to let your girlfriend know you're playing so that she won't get mad at you after. Number 3 is to leash the jungler. Aside from the roamer and mid laner, you should also leash the jungler if they are starting with the buff close to your lane. This applies to both the EXP and gold laners. This helps their clear speed and allows them to rotate faster. If you don't leash and the enemy team does, then your jungler is already at a slight disadvantage. Just remember to leave when the buff is about to die so that you won't accidentally share EXP with your jungler. Don't worry about missing minions. You'll arrive in lane just in time even if you're using a hero as slow as Terizla. If you're an EXP laner like me, try to cut the lane whenever possible. This is one of the most notable differences I have observed when comparing Mythical Honor and Mythical Glory players from lower ranks. You don't cut because of its impact outright, but because of what you could do after cutting. I'll talk about this later on when we get to number 11. Depending on how deep you plan on cutting the wave, you have to arrive in that place at these timers. The risk of cutting the lane is that you're exposing yourself to danger as you're essentially inside the enemy's territory. So, you have to pay attention where the enemies are to avoid being punished. I saw Harley moving to bot, which is how I knew it was safe to cut. However, I didn't expect Atlas to rotate this early, and I was caught in a bad position. I was prepared to flicker if needed because I was afraid Zalong might kill me with Inspire, but I eventually decided it was no longer needed. And this is lesson number 5. Don't waste flicker. It's a versatile tool that you can use for both escaping and engaging, but the only drawback is its long cooldown. It's crucial to know when you should use it and when not to, especially on a hero like Terizla who has low mobility and no escape skill. You'll see in a little while why this was the correct decision. The first turtle is the first neutral objective of any game, and often dictates how the rest of the match will play out. It's important to get a good position to contest it, especially if you're the XP laner. Here, I even sacrificed the lane minions and getting level 4 just to provide information and stall until my team arrives. Ideally, I should be already level 4 if I cut the waves just before the turtle arrives, but I knew if our jungler gets the turtle, then I could still get level 4. Because Terizla is naturally tanky, it's also my duty to give vision and information about the enemy team. This allows my team to know where the enemies are hiding and avoid getting ambushed. Having this information also helps in making the right decision when to enter the team fight. However, I overextended a little bit and got harassed quite a lot. I barely got out alive thanks to the flicker I didn't use earlier. Thankfully, the cannon minion was still alive and I finally got my ultimate. And this is when the 8th key lesson comes in. Don't be afraid of using your ultimate. Even if you only catch one enemy, ensuring a kill is already better than letting them escape. Even if you somehow miss it, the worst thing that would happen is that it would just be on cooldown again. So play with confidence and don't be afraid of making mistakes, because that's the only way you'll improve. Number 9 is knowing your limits. Knowing exactly when and how the enemy can kill you is the best way to avoid getting killed. If you know what specific skill or combo is a threat to you, you can keep track of its cooldown and only fight when you have the advantage. Here, I knew at this health, Zilong could kill me with his ult, so I avoided fighting head on. Instead, I hid in the bush and focused on last hitting the minions with my skills. Another way to avoid getting killed easily is prioritize building defense. This actually gives you more room for error and you wouldn't be punished as hard if you do commit a mistake. In this game, I rushed Dominance Ice after building the regular boots for physical defense, anti-heal, and attack speed reduction, all of which is useful against Zilong and even other heroes on the enemy team. Even if you're a damage dealer, you can also build defense items to avoid getting easily bursted down. There are even dedicated damage items that can increase defense and survivability, like Rose Gold Meteor and Wind of Nature for marksmen, and Winter Transient for mages. Remember step 7 when I told you to cut the waves? Well, that was so you could do step 11, which is to be active on the map. Most lower ranked players typically focus on staying in their lane all throughout the match. However, this limits your impact because more skilled players make less mistakes and are generally harder to kill in a 1v1 situation. What you could do instead is proactively roam around the map, like going to the mid lane or just getting vision in the enemy jungle. This also puts pressure and chokes out their map, and you can even catch unsuspecting enemies off guard. But if nothing else, it just relieves some boredom compared to always staying in lane. But if your playstyle leans more towards outplaying the enemy in lane, it's important that you know the proper way of trading to get an advantage. Trading is a very complex topic that I could go in depth about in a whole nother video. But the basic way of thinking about it is taking turns with your enemy. Once your skills are up, it's your turn to try and damage your opponent. And once they're on cooldown, it's the enemy's turn to try and kill you. The only difference in ML is that you could both take your turns at the same time, or you could choose to miss a turn. Trading is basically maximizing your damage during your turn while simultaneously minimizing the damage you take during the enemy's turn. Here I was in a position to try and burst down Zilong as fast as I could, but my damage was lacking. Then I immediately backed away because I knew that I wouldn't win if I fought him in a battle of basic attacks. Instead, I waited for my skills to cool down so that I could get another turn. Number 13 is an extension of number 6 and 7, and this is to get in position to zone enemies away if your team is taking an objective. This is usually done by tanks or sustained fighters to prevent the enemy jungler from contesting the turtle or lord. Even if you don't actually plan to fight, you can just think of it as a bluff or intimidating the enemy. This allows your team's damage dealers to safely secure the objective. What you're doing during the time between the last turtle and the first lord usually just depends on the situation. It's like a freestyle of some sort. But as a guide, you could repeat steps 4, 7, and 11 to gain an advantage for your team before setting up for the lord. But just remember number 15. Don't be greedy and don't be complacent, which is the mistake I made here. I cut the waves carelessly without thinking I could get punished. As you see, I'm far from being perfect and still make dumb mistakes, but I still managed to reach my goal. What's important is learning from our mistakes and finding ways to improve rather than blaming our teammates. The most crucial part of the game usually starts when the first lord spawns. Everything leading up to this point can be erased by one lord fight alone. Knowing how important this is, you should let your whole team know by signaling them and stalling while waiting for them to arrive. Also, remember to target the enemy's jungler as they're the one holding the retribution spell. Once they die or are too low to contest, it's unlikely that the rest of their team would even think of contesting, and you'll get the lord for free. After getting the lord, most players' mistake is being too eager to end the game, and what they do is try to push with the lord. What you should do instead is manage the waves so that all 3 lanes are pushing. You do this by clearing both side lanes, even before they meet in the middle, while leaving the middle lane be and letting the minions clear the lane by itself. Another tip that sets you apart from other players is learning how to read the enemy's movement and predict where they would be. Here I saw Atlas was moving towards bottom and guessed that he might be getting vision for a teammate planning to clear the minion wave. What I didn't expect was to see Ixia lagging. Oh well, free kill. It's also important to know the purpose of each lord. If you didn't already know, the lord has a different name and corresponding different abilities depending on the time you kill it. To give a brief summary, the elemental lord spawns at 8 minutes and grants a buff minion wave. The lord that spawns at 12 minutes is called the enhanced lord, which charges at the turret dealing a lot of damage. Finally, at 18 minutes, the evolved lord spawns, who, along with the abilities of all the lords before it, also grants a buff to nearby allied heroes and has increased damage reduction for each allied hero nearby. Because of this, each lord has a different purpose in the game. The elemental lord in particular should be used to destroy all the remaining inner and outer turrets, either by accompanying it or using it as a distraction. Unless you're really far ahead or you just happen to wipe out the enemy team, it's unlikely that you'll be able to end the game with just the first lord. The most you could probably do is proc the base turret's passive. While waiting for the next lord, you could pressure the lane opposite to where it would spawn. This forces the enemy to send at least one person to clear the wave, otherwise they would lose the turret. This prevents them from setting up the lord area and grants your team a numbers advantage if ever they do decide to fight. In your games, you'll occasionally see a mispositioned enemy. Don't be afraid to punish them right away. This small opening could get you a kill, especially if your team is able to back you up. And even if you don't get a kill, you won't really have much to lose, so it's generally better to just give it a try. The most basic idea to winning teamfights is to target the enemy backline first. Everybody already knows this, but it's not as easy to apply during the game as it sounds. One way to make this easier is to let your enemies bait themselves. In this situation, I saw Atlas chasing my teammates and knew that if he got a set, then his teammates would be right behind him. So I went straight to the backline and counter-engaged on them. Even if I wasn't able to kill them, this alone stopped them from following up on the Atlas and prevented them from potentially killing my teammates. But getting a double kill is also a good bonus. While moving towards the lord, I saw Zalong cutting the wave and knew that he could possibly come from behind and target our backline as well. So if you're on the other side of lesson number 22, you need number 23 to watch out for flanking enemies. Here I tried to check all bushes, but I also needed to zone out the enemies just in case the Zalong already recalled to base. However, he was still able to successfully burst down our jungler, which put us at a disadvantage. And when you're in this situation where it's a 3 versus 5 and your jungler is dead, the best thing you could do is focus on targeting heroes. Although you could attempt to steal the lord, it's very unlikely to be successful if their jungler knows how to retreat. Instead, it's better to try and damage them enough to make them back off from the lord and try to buy as much time for your team. We managed to turn the tables on the enemy and even got the second lord as well. Here I saw my teammates fighting and was prepared to use my ult flicker combo. But when I saw that they were backing away, I decided to not continue with it. And this boils down to key lesson number 25, which is reading your team's movements. In solo queue, you don't always have the best communication, so it could be quite the challenge. It doesn't even really matter if you're correct. What matters most in ML is being able to play cohesively as 5. This is one of the most common mistakes most players make. They often rant about getting good sets, but their team isn't around to follow it up. But some fault also falls on the part of the setter, because a set is only good if your team is in a position to follow it up. So always try your best to look at the map and connect with your teammates before committing to an engage. The opposite of number 5 is number 26, which is to not be afraid of using flicker immediately. This applies during the late game when one wrong position could get you killed because the enemies already have high enough damage to instantly burst you down. Like in this scenario, I knew Atlas was going to use his ultimate, so I immediately flickered away before he activated it. If I let him ult me, I would have taken damage and most likely would still need to flicker away to survive. So in this case, flickering in advance is actually the better choice. When you're already in this position of having victory within your grasp, it's easy to tunnel vision on breaking the base. But how many times have you been within the verge of winning, then you suddenly get wiped out and the enemy gets a comeback push instead? So in this situation, it's important to not overextend. Just get what you can, hopefully destroy all base turrets, and when there's no minion waves anymore, just retreat and wait for the next lord. In the meantime, just repeat step 20. But if you're using a damaged hero like a mage or marksman, it's best to not show yourself on the map so that the enemies won't be able to target you. But if you absolutely have to, make sure your roamer is checking bushes for you to avoid getting picked off. This was the mistake our Novaria made. She showed herself on the map, letting the enemies know where she is, and face checked the bush where Zilong happened to be camping, and got bursted down quickly. When taking the Lord, especially in the late game, you typically want to set up the waves by pressuring the lanes. Enemies would be hesitant to contest because they must clear all minion waves first. You can do this by setting up a slow push on the opposite lane of the Lord and fast clearing the mid lane and the lane close to the Lord. Number 30 is to simply be patient. During the heat of the battle, it's easy to target the wrong hero. So once you know who you're supposed to target during a team fight, it's important to focus on them, even if you need to patiently wait in the bush. My logic why I keep targeting Ixia is that she is the only hero most likely to wipe out our whole team. Her ultimate can easily kill 5 heroes, especially if Atlas gets a good set. Harley, Zilong, and Zask are also capable of high damage, but they can only do it to one hero at a time. Out of their whole team, Ixia is the most dangerous because of her AoE potential. Remember how Novaria got killed by Zilong earlier? Well, that almost happened again. But this time, Novaria had Winter Truncheon that bought her enough time for backup to arrive. And this is lesson number 31. Simply learning from your mistakes and applying them as the game goes on ensures that you're constantly improving little by little. When pushing with the Lord, don't forget to synchronize or flow the waves to have all lanes pushing at once, making it harder for enemies to defend and making it easier for you to hit the base. Again, simply clear both side lanes and don't clear mid. Finally, if the hero you're using has little turret damage, like a tank, then it's better to use your skills to distract the enemies and allow your allies to freely hit the base. Congratulations, you just reached mythical glory. But if you're still struggling to win, then maybe you're making mistakes without even realizing it. Check this video to make sure you're not accidentally doing these mistakes that are holding you back.